In the late 1890s, America was becoming increasingly divided amongst itself. Farmers and the working classes felt that the urban middle class and upper classes were being favored by politicians and government. All this country needs is a good war. It will unite them against a common enemy and thus bringing them together. The solution came with the Spanish-American War.
Breaking news! The Spanish have sunk the USS Maine in Cuba. I repeat, the Spanish have sunk the USS Maine in Cuba.
Didn't we send the Maine to Havana to protect Americans in Cuba? We totally did. President McKinley needs to take action for this.
Please be patient, everyone.
Mr. President, we must declare war on the Spanish in revenge for this heinous crime.
Well, on the good side for America, we crushed the Spanish. But on the bad side, it was kind of mean of us.
There really is no proof that the Spanish placed the bomb on the Maine. It could have been a Cuban or even a yellow journalist just trying to boost newspaper sales.
These were journalists and even press owners who made a fortune by exaggerating or even manipulating the truth.
Regardless, the Spanish-American War did what Teddy wanted. It set him on a track to fame and nomination.
Our epic defeat of the Spanish also scared Europe into accepting our open door policy in China, which allowed us to trade in their Chinese spheres of influence.
Guys, the populists and the progressives are not the same thing. In fact, they weren't even from the same ages.
No, we populists emerged from the Granges. We're farmers who have been shafted ever since the Homestead Act was enacted.
What? That makes no sense. I thought you enjoyed the land and all the free cents.
This is true, well, what we first believed, but with the Homestead Act, the frontier became deceased.
Oh, agreed. And didn't you believe in a man named Jennings?
Mostly so, we wanted his demandings. Well, free silver at the Mint. However, when we agreed to be with him, the Democrats took us in. It was the populist end. But what about you and your Progressive Party?
Well, first, the idea that we're our own party is faulty. At least until Teddy split the Republicans into the GOP and his own Progressive Party, Bull Moose.
Wow, now I'm confused. If the Progressives weren't their own party, who were they?
Both Republicans and Democrats who thought the government should keep business at bay. We didn't like trusts, and we believe that the government should enforce Interstate Commerce Act or bust.
Okay, I get what you say. So is Teddy Roosevelt your only man?
Now, there were 3 progressive presidents hand in hand. Teddy was one, and he raised a trust-busting battle and won. He also helped get food companies to be more sanitary.
What about his next in line, that William Howard Taft right behind?
He too was progressive, though that term is suggestive. He too bust those trusts, but the tariff he raised, much to our dismay.
And that preacher's kid from Princeton, Mr. Woodrow Wilson?
Though he was a pain, progressivism was his game. He was smart and not too liberal. He kept a fine line right in the middle. The Clayton Antitrust Act was great, in fact. He also formed the Federal Reserve to hopefully keep the banks preserved.
That's neat. Well, I guess it's obvious to see where we're different from
The populists and the progressives are not the same thing.
Hey, that's our land you're taking!
No, don't worry about it. We're not going to take any more of your land, okay?
You said you wouldn't take any more!
Oh, it's okay. I promise. That's it. We're not taking any more of your land.
I wish we could stop them, but I've seen what they've done to the other tribes. Hey, stop taking our land! Some Indians continued to bend to the colonists' will, but many fought back.
For example, the intense fighting between the Indians and the colonists forced the British to set a proclamation line in 1763, which stated that the colonists couldn't go past the Appalachian Mountains.
However, when Americans got their independence, this barrier was lifted and Americans flooded across the Appalachians. This led to a lot of conflicts between the settlers and Native Americans.
The settlers and the Native Americans both committed atrocities against each other, but the Americans kept pushing west and pushing the Indians further and further out. Okay, so we're not really a fan of all your weird culture stuff with all the feathers and all that fun stuff. So just convert to our religion and, kind of adopt our ways, and we promise we are not going to take any more of your land. But the Americans went back on their promise. The most famous example of this is with the Cherokee, who did exactly what the Americans said, but under Andrew Jackson, they passed the Indian Removal Act, which forced them onto a small little plot in Oklahoma. The actual journey was called the Trail of Tears, and lots of Native Americans died in the journey.
But not all Native Americans accepted their fate without a fight. Enter the Shawnee General, Tecumseh.
Tribes, it is time to come together. These intruders have done too much to us. They have stripped us from our land, our culture, from everything that we hold dear to us. It is time to throw off the yoke of white culture and return to our roots. I know we have been enemies in the past, but now is the time to resolve our differences against a common enemy.
Tecumseh became an iconic general because he was able to unite competing tribes. Though he wanted to get rid of the white culture in the Indian tribes, he strategically allied his forces with the British.
Tecumseh was successful for a while, but he was killed at the Battle of Thames, and ultimately he lost.
Eventually, even the last bits of Indian land in Oklahoma was taken over, and the Indians were forced to move to tiny reservations.
The reservations had to be managed though, and the people that did that were part of an agency in the federal government. But it was an unregulated agency, and it became one of the most corrupt of all the federal agencies.
A certain amount of taxes was supposed to go towards helping these reservations. But often, the members of the Indian Ring would pocket the money instead, leaving the Indians helpless to feed themselves on these reservations.
The Indian Ring kept demanding more and more money from the people who didn't know all this corruption was going on. The Americans were fed up with having to supply the Indian reservations with so much money, and it brought Native American resentment to an all-time high.
At one point in California, Indian slavery was even legal.
America has no side, no opinion in this great war. We are a neutral country, and we intend to stay that way. What? Ladies and gentlemen, the Germans have sunk the Lusitania! It is a neutral passenger ship shuttling innocent American passengers. However, we must remain neutral. The Germans have signed the Sussex Pledge, so we should be safe. Did I mention that we are going to stay neutral through this entire war? You should remember that at the polls.
Through his first term as president, Woodrow Wilson tried very hard to keep America out of war, but he wasn't just doing this because he was a nice guy.
He knew that keeping America out of the war would do a lot to get him reelected.
A large reason as to why he stayed neutral was to get votes as well.
His Democratic Party was really, really diverse. If he sided with the Allies in the war to end all wars, the German and Irish Democrats would be furious. If he supported the Central Powers, then the British and the Italians would be mad.
Either way, if Wilson supported a side of the war, the Democratic Party would split, and Wilson would lose any chance he had of re-election. He also called for freedom of the seas, which would allow America to trade with whoever they wanted during the war.
It sounds like a neutral thing, but the freedom of the seas would allow America to prosper off European loss of life.
Anyways, in the election of 1916, Wilson gets re-elected on his plank that he kept America out of war. However, before then, America had been loaning money out to Britain, who had been loaning money out to the Allies, and so the American economy was very much tied into the war European economy. If Europe was going down, we were going down with them.
It didn't help that Britain was blockading our trade ships from Germany. Wilson knew we would have to enter the war, but he made sure to get re-elected before he told everybody that.
Thanks America for the re-election. But bad news, the Germans have started their whole unrestricted submarine warfare again.
Breaking news! Germany tries to provoke Mexico into war with America!
Let's not tell the public about this one.
You know, minus the fact that Mexico wanted nothing to do with the war.
Crap, now you all want a war? I guess we're just gonna have to go to war. Like we would have all along.
America didn't have much of a choice in entering World War I because Britain's economy was going down and it was taking America too.
During the war, America had a socialized war economy. Thanks to Herbert Hoover, we economized everything, so much as to where we had to ration very little things.
However, the Committee of Public Information was set up by the government to basically tell the public only what the government wanted them to hear. Yay for propaganda!
Well, Wilson was pretty mad because since we entered the war, he lost the House and Senate to Republicans in the midterm election of 1918. So he decided that he would just ditch Congress altogether when he went over to Europe for the peace talks in Paris. Well, understandably, this made Congress a little bit mad.
Germany was decimated and kind of humiliated by their defeat. But when Wilson brought out his 14 points and the idea of a League of Nations, Germany thought, okay, we can live with this. The peace conference in Paris wound up, however, with, instead of the 14 points, having the unconditional surrender of Germany. The League of Nations went into the treaty, but America didn't want to join it.
It didn't help that a bunch of angry Republicans in Congress were at home waiting to shoot down anything that President Wilson came back with. America overrode the Treaty of Paris in the League of Nations, so technically we were at war with Germany until July of 1921, where we signed our own little treaty with them.
I need to make some bucks. Only got 20 million in the bank. I'm gonna crush the competition. Social Darwinism. Started off making about 50 cents a day, and then I started digging down in the ground. Found there's some oil, such a commodity, and now you know why. You play Monopoly. Come to me, I control the money, even bailed out the government with all of my green. All this competition is bad for all our business. Let's just stop the fighting. Let's all come together and merge. Just trust me on this. Fusing it, melted it, turned that iron to steel. Working in those factories for about 12 hours a day. But I'm not a bad guy. Sold my coat to Morgan, now I'm giving my money and building a bunch of libraries. I control the railroads. Poor farmers, seriously, can you sell your stuff to me? Linking the country and making some money, and all the while linking my huge monopoly. I want a decent pay, I'll give a decent pay. With a couple strings attached, you can get $5 a day. Faster, go workers assemble. Gotta boost my efficiency and tailor microfactory. I control the process from the start to finish, but then overproduction would lead to the depression. I need to make some bucks. Only got 20 million in the bank. I'm gonna crush the competition. Social Darwinism. I help the immigrants and scam the citizens. I'm boss of everything and run corrupted rings. Political machines are my game in this city. From Tammany we run and fix the elections. I need to make some bucks. Only got 20 million in the bank. I'm gonna crush the competition. Social Darwinism.
Okay, so maybe that was a little confusing.
These robber barons were able to expand their businesses so much because of America's laissez-faire policy at the time. Because of that, profits skyrocketed, but so did corruption in business. America was in the hands of a few rich and powerful men.
JP Morgan controlled 10 times more money than the entire federal government's reserve. And John D. Rockefeller and others put together huge and dangerous monopolies by eating up smaller companies.
Also, Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest trickled down to everyday life as well. Instead of believing we were rich because God liked us better, we believed that we're rich just because we are better.
Social Darwinism was used to justify everything from imperialism to the growing poverty to mistreatment of workers. Nativist thinking was a huge part of the 1920s, like how the KKK reached an all-time high.
Also, the refusal to put any regulations on working conditions meant that the vast labor surplus, companies could work their employees for practically nothing in terrible conditions.
But soon, muckrakers began to expose the horrors within factories. Books like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle demanded change.
But the final straw came with the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire when a factory of working women that was locked shut caught on fire. Hundreds burned or jumped out of the windows to their deaths. People no longer could sit idle. That is when the Progressive Party really found its foothold.